Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the BIPS webinar for our last of the 2025 BIPS webinars, Beyond the Botanical with Persian Collections at Kew Gardens, Library and Archives with Isabel Dalter-Jung and Shebnem Baluch. Shebnem Baluch is a preventative conservation officer at Leighton House Museum and an independent researcher whose work focuses on Persian cultural heritage in UK collections. With a background spanning conservation, archives, and curatorial practice, her research examines the ways historical collections preserve cultural knowledge beyond their original purpose. She is co-curator of the Persia Reimagined, From Herbarium to Heritage at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew in London, which brings to light the overlooked cultural narratives within the herbarium's Persian collections. Using plant specimens, diaries, photographs, and field notes from early 20th century expeditions, her work reveals the unexpected, from everyday encounters and food traditions to architectural sketches and personal reflections hidden within botanical records. Alongside her curatorial practice, Shebnem develops outreach programs and community workshops that connect archives with contemporary audiences, encouraging dialogue across cultures, disciplines, and generations. Isabel Dalter-Jung is currently assistant archivist at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew and co-curator of the exhibition Persian Reimagined, which is running from September of 2025 now to January 22 of 2026. She has previously worked at the Royal Society. She's keen to promote the use of archive collections to as broad an audience as possible through outreach and engagement opportunities. Archives are for everyone, and her broader research interest lies in multisensory approaches to heritage collections, in particular the use and occurrence of smell in archives. So let me remind you, I'm going to turn the floor over to them. All questions and such, again, should go through the Q&A that go into the Zoom, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and I will relay them to the participants. Isabel, Shebnem, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I hope, well, shout if you cannot see a slide or if you cannot hear us. But we would also like to thank BIPS for inviting us to speak today. This talk is part of a wider outreach project that we're doing, and we have also received a grant from the Institute for Persian Studies, which will fund workshops for public engagement that we're running in January. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about those in a bit. But thank you all very much for attending. It's very exciting to see that we've hit triple figures. So without further ado, I will briefly go over the schedule for today. So we will be, don't really need to introduce ourselves. Andrew's done a great job of that. But we'll very briefly reintroduce ourselves. I will then give an overview of Kew Gardens archives, what we have in our collections, and then Shebnem will take over and talk about how this project even got started in the first place. Both of us will take turns looking at exhibition highlights. You'll be able to see some of the items that were on display as part of the Persia Reimagined exhibition. You'll also be able to see some of the things behind the scenes and some things which didn't make the cut, which should be very exciting. I will then also talk about outreach and engagement that we've done around this project. We will talk about how we would like to create a legacy of this project and where possible avenues for further research lie. I will then also share some useful links and also our contact information about how to get in touch with us if anything that we talk about today tickles your fancy and you would like to know more and you would like to visit and you would like to use our collections. That is ultimately what this is all about. So please do get in touch with us at the end. Right. So again, very, very briefly, I'm assistant archivist at Kew Gardens. As part of this, if you get in touch with the archives, it is probably me that you will be in touch with. I am mainly responsible for the inquiry service. So I make sure that researchers and anyone who's interested in accessing the collections knows what we've got and can see it on time. So that is how you would probably encounter me in the archives. And I'll quickly pass on to Shebnem. I don't know if you want to add to anything that Andrew has said.
Not really. Andrew did a great job. I'm Shabnam. I'm basically a conservator. My background is in restoration and rehabilitation of historical buildings, but then I kind of shifted it to more working on the objects. I'm also a researcher in Persian materials in UK archives, and yeah.
Great. So let's move on to the next slide. So To understand the Persian materials, we will take a bit of a step back and I will introduce Kew Gardens archives to you all. So we sit alongside the library and illustrations collections in one department, but as an archivist and also with archives being a heavy focus of the exhibition itself, I will only talk about the archive side, but feel free to get in touch with the teams to learn more about the library and illustrations collections as well. And the exhibition does feature items from both of those collections too. So the archives at Kew Gardens date mostly from the 1840s onwards, which is when the gardens came under national ownership, having previously been under royal ownership before that. And there are some exceptions. We do have things from the 1700s and very, very rarely something older than that. But broadly speaking, we're a 19th century onwards kind of archive. We count our archives in sheets. So we have over 7 million sheets in our collection. If one laid out the archive materials as they are in the shelves, it would be the distance from our building all the way down to the other end of the gardens to the pagoda. It's roughly 2 kilometers that you would have to walk. So that's, again, shows you a bit of the scale of what we have to deal with. Our collection is, unfortunately, at the moment, largely uncatalogued. This does not mean that it is inaccessible. It just means that it might take a bit of a longer back and forth with me or someone from my team to find what you're looking for. It isn't as simple as typing in a keyword or a plant or a subject into the catalogue, but there are definitely ways that we can help you find what you need. So from our end, as archivists, we rely on indexes, databases, existing catalogue entries, of course, but also finding aids that have been created by miracle archivists of the past who we're grateful to every single day. So there are definitely ways into this collection. There are 2 strands to our archives. So we have, on one hand, the personal papers, and these relate to scientists, botanists, plant collectors, botanical artists, gardeners at Kew as well. And they contain notebooks and correspondence, manuscripts and publications, perhaps research notes, draft materials, and a lot of the examples from today's talk relate to those or come from those personal papers. On the other hand, we also have institutional records. So they are created during Kew's functioning as an organization, so the day-to-day work. So they could be, for example, minutes or logbook entries, registry files, plant lists, and so on. And the way that personal papers are arranged by the creating person, institutional records are often arranged, in our case, by the creating department or the institutional area where they stem from. So you can find horticultural papers, you could find herbarium papers, papers relating to laboratory work in the gardens or visitor operation activities. So there's a lot in our institutional archive as well. And crucially, one thing I do want to underline again is archives are for everyone. I appreciate access can seem quite daunting and often exclusionary. Our archive is not just for academics. You don't have to be a PhD researcher to access our collections. You don't need a letter of introduction. We've had all sorts of visitors be welcomed into our reading room. We have family historians who just want to look into their gardening ancestors. We've had artists come in to view collections. We've had people just with a passion project, some curiosity come in. So it really is a collection for everyone. So I just want to stress that again. And at the end, there will also be a chance to note down our contact details if you are interested in visiting us. But I will pass on to Shabnam now to talk a bit more about how this project even got started.
So the project actually started couple of months, more than a couple of months, I can say 4 months after I started at Kew. So I started at Kew to do my placement for my MA in Cultural Heritage, and I was just learning about how Isabel and the rest of the team at Kew, basically they were running the archive, and I wanted to learn more in that matter. But just out of curiosity, I started typing the name Iran in Persia just to see if there is anything around. And I found out, to my surprise, that there are many materials and not as categorized as the rest of the materials of the colonized countries, but still there are many materials mentioning the name Persia. There are botanists who went to Persia at the time, that they kept everything in their diaries, in their photo albums, and that was actually the reason that everything started. And even though I wanted to do my dissertation on the management of the archive, I totally changed the subject to work on part of the materials that were available in the archive, which is the diaries of one of the botanists, Mr. Bowles, that you can see on the slide as part of the diaries, handwritten, and also one of the photos of the photo album, the photos that have been taken by him. And that's basically how we started going through a little deeper than we imagined into the Persian materials that were at Kew Gardens archive. Yeah.
Great. So as Shabnam has mentioned, starting around collecting activities, botanizing activities. So this was very much the obvious start for a project like this. We have a lot of materials relating to plant collectors and botanists, and those collecting materials can come in all shapes and sizes. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see 3 items. I don't know if you can actually make out the little thin booklet on top, but 3 items that are all relating to collecting activities. They vary massively in size. You've got massive terrain profiles compared to very small field notebooks that were collected. So there is truly a myriad of items that we could have chosen. I would like to also take this opportunity, and Shabnam has briefly alluded to this as well, that obviously the global distribution of where we hold material from is informed by Britain's colonial activity in the past. Kew Gardens was very much the botanical nucleus of the empire. The plant extraction and exchange between Britain and colonized regions especially is a big part of Kew Gardens history. And there is, for example, a big focus on economic botany, so useful plants and how to make plants and plant products profitable. So that is a part of Kew Gardens history, and it is one that we should acknowledge in this case as well. Persia was never a British colony, as you will know, but military and diplomatic interests remained in the area due to its proximity to colonial India. So we did a blog post in October on our website, and William Monk, who we've worked with a bit, he works at the British Library with the India Office Records, and he details this a bit further in that blog post. So do have a look at that after this lecture. But it was something that we wanted to raise quite early on in our talk. But back to the collecting materials. Now these can take different shapes and sizes, as mentioned. They could be notebooks, sketches, diaries, maps that people drew, lists of plants they collected. And obviously they would detail, of course, the collecting activities. So when the journeys began, what the itinerary looked like, specifically what plants they collected, what plants they sent to Kew and in what condition, where they were collected. So they recorded things like the altitude as well, because that was important for cultivation and the survival of plants. People often drew plants out in the field, they just sketched them. So there's a lot of actively collecting activities that are detailed in these records. But there are also the people that come through a lot of these materials. So these people were the ones that guided collectors to the place where plants grew. They hosted collectors in their homes. They gave them a bed and a roof over their heads. They drove them to very remote landscapes and places that for plant collecting activities. They translated for them. And in these interactions with people is where the social and cultural histories that we focused on stem from. And for the start of our exhibition, we focused on 2 main collectors. So one, Shabnam has already mentioned, Edward Bowles, pictured on the top right-hand corner. And the other one is Otto Stapf, who was an Austrian who would go on to work for Kew as keeper of the Herbarium, but he traveled to Persia in the 1880s before his time at Kew, and we have his papers as well. So I've included 2 outtakes of their personal papers as they would appear on the back end of our catalogue, just to give you an idea of how much Persian related materials are in both of these personal paper collections. They also travelled to other places. We have a lot more for each of these people, but we just wanted to give bit of an insight into how much there actually was. And in the middle, I've also included the first of 3 pages summarizing all the archive material, all the findable archive materials that we've got relating to Persia and Iran. And if you are interested in the rest, obviously feel free to email us at the end and ask for a complete list. But yes, this is just to give a bit of an overview of just how much there was to start with. And I'm going to pass on to Shabnam now to talk a bit about how we even picked what we ended up choosing.
So, as you all know, Kew is an botanical archive, so it is expected to be able to find many botanical information. What basically I started looking for was what I can find other than botanical information that botanists who went to Persia at the time basically gathered together. And it was really interesting that when they kept their diaries and the information, some of them also started categorizing that information. We have diaries in basically notebooks of many botanists who mentioned in different categories all the information from Persia, categories like food, culture, people, weather, and whatever that was either surprising or interesting for them. And basically, we put this as a foundation of our exhibition. We wanted to be able to put out this information out, to be able to invite people to the archive, saying that there is more to Kew Gardens archive rather than the botanical materials that you would expect to find. And that said, we started going through the different materials and started choosing from them. Um, Mainly, many of the materials would be text based, but we also found really nice illustrations. The one in the middle is actually. It was exactly in the middle of the photo album that Bowles took the photos in Persia. We don't know whether he did it or he actually added that it's a Persian rose added to that photo album. The other 2 sketches are from Udushbab sketchbook, and you can see that on the left side of the screen that he also started drawing the buildings, also the landscape. He was testing different colors on the right hand side the sketch you see to be able to get the right color of the flowers that he was explaining in his notes. So there are more to the materials that we have rather than just the botanical information. Um, Going through the next slides, we're going to explain everything else that we decided to put on. Not everything, some of them. So for the way that we decided to put our items together to be able to put them on display, we created a display case just for collectors because it was how everything actually got started through the diaries and notes of the botanists. Then we went to basically more information of the people who traveled. Still, they were there for botanical research reasons, but they went further more in finding information about Persian people. One of the books on display, which is really the nicest one, I guess, because it's my favorite. It's actually a lady botanist who went to Persia at the time, and she's explaining everything from point of view of a woman botanist went to Persia and how people would treat her different from a in comparison with a men tourist or a men scientist, and also how people change their minds when they realize she also got some experience in practicing medicine, and explaining all that and blending it with all the information she's getting through living among people. It's really interesting, and we put these information out to be able to basically open dialogues for people. We know that in some of the materials that they're out there, some of them, as a Persian, I might consider them like wrong information or need a little bit more to the context to be added to the context. But basically, we had to decide to put the materials out to be able to open dialogues rather than drawing a line saying that this is the wrong information or the right information. This way, by putting them out and opening the dialogues, we can get more out of it as researchers, also as public, a new audience to Kew Gardens archive, because usually this wouldn't be an archive that you would look for this sort of information in. I will pass to Isabel for the next slide.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned this previously very briefly when I mentioned William Monk, who we worked with at the British Library. So there was some collaboration with the British Library and their records relating to Persia. So we used this specifically to underline the reasons behind British presence in Persia, why we have this legacy in our archive of British presence in Persia, and to show a bit of the intersection between military personnel and botanical collecting. This could be an exhibition in of its own. We have a 30-page research guide on the topic if anyone's interested, but we wanted to just highlight this aspect a bit more. So the item that we've got on display in the exhibition is not pictured. Apologies if you thought this map was really cool, but we have a photograph from Lord Curzon's photograph album around the turn of the century. And Lord Curzon was quite an influential figure in Anglo-Persian relations. And this photograph album is originally with the British Library and has been digitized as part of a wider project between the India Office Records and Qatar National Library, Qatar Digital Library project. So the photo album itself, all of Lord Curzon's photos are actually online, freely available. There's a link at the end for you to browse through that if you like. And the reason why I've picked this map to highlight is it was something we were shown during a visit to the British Library very early on in the stages of curating this exhibition. We got to go and meet the team that are working, especially on the India Office Records, and they pulled this map for us. And it's a map of the Turco-Persian frontier between 1849 and 1855. It was made by Russian and English officers, as you can see in the middle there. And it doesn't only show the topographical detail of the border, sort of detailing the landscape and how best to traverse it and journey through it, but also they capture botanical and vegetational data. So that is in a key written in French on the right-hand side of the slide. And we've just found that very interesting, the fact that this was also information that was of use and of interest to military personnel. So that sort of made that connection for us. And it was just a very good opportunity to highlight other Persian collections and avenues that the research could be taken down. So that, unfortunately, this map, I should clarify, is not in the exhibition. It was we wanted to, it was way too big. It is actually a humongous thing. So if you are interested in looking at this one specifically, you have to get in touch with the British Library for it. Now, one aspect that, as Shamma mentioned, we want to talk about more, and one topic that is very closely tied to social and cultural histories, is that of food. So food is an inherently communal activity, really. It is often entrenched in tradition and regionality. So people make use of their native plants and the resources around them. And in our case, the way that we've managed to tie this into our exhibition is still tied to the aspect of military collectors. Now, the page on the left-hand side that you can see on the slide is from Rear Admiral Paul First's notebook. Now, he was in the military, and then after his retirement, around the 1950s and 60s, he ended up becoming an amateur botanist. So he and his wife, Polly, they went traveling. They went all across Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and Turkey in their Land Rover, actually called the Rose of Persia. Fun fact for you there. And they collected plants and sent them back to Kew. And he made this notebook, and it is entitled Notes on a Journey to Persia. And he had different categories in this notebook. So he categorized his observations based on the food, the wine, the weather, that he tried to plot a very short history of the country. He also wrote about different kinds of birds that he encountered and that he witnessed in bird song. He did also write about different kinds of Persians as well. So there is also that element of prejudice and stereotype that was happening in these records. But this page in particular might feature some familiar favorites to some people. We have yogurt right at the top. There is pilau, there's sherbet, dried figs, lamb is mentioned. And, it's for lamb that in Shiraz there are 2 lambing seasons per year. Very good. And then I can't quite make out the word that he writes after very good, but his review of the lamb is very complimentary. And so whether intentional or not, these collectors, with verse it was clearly intentional, but oftentimes we find references to food and the activity of eating together and experiencing food from a different culture in these records. So the 2 smaller pictures with the individual lines photographed are actually from Edward Bowles' photograph album. So you reference he's taken pictures of the cooks, he's taken pictures of the process of buying dinner. So food was obviously, you can't avoid eating, especially not on a collecting journey. So it was something that would have been documented, and I think it's a very telling thing. And it shows a lot about the social and cultural histories that they found themselves entangled in, even if they didn't intend to record it as such. One plant that we really also wanted to highlight is Crocus sativus. So that is used to make saffron, which some of you might be familiar with and have tasted. Now, as mentioned before, archives collections are quite difficult to navigate via subject names or plant names or anything like that. It's quite difficult to just type in Crocus sativus in our archive catalogue and come up with a myriad of records. But other collections work differently. So we've chosen an example from the illustrations collection in the top right-hand corner. It is made by an unknown artist. We don't know when or where or by whom it was made, but it is obviously still beautiful. And we connected this to a herbarium specimen. Now, the herbarium team, they sit separately. They look after over 7 million of these specimen sheets, so where dried plant specimens have been attached to the page with metadata, and they are actually also in the process of digitizing all of these millions of specimen sheets, so that resource will be available to the public as well. And what I personally found quite nice is that you can, in the dried crocus at the top of the specimen sheet, you can still see that bit of color from that is then mirrored in the actual botanical illustrations. So it also goes to show the scientific value of those botanical illustrations. Just by looking at the specimen sheet, you wouldn't know what it would look like in its prime, in bloom. So it's always a very good idea to combine these 2 resources when doing any sort of research with our collections. And sort of the nice way to tie together this section on saffron production was something from Shabnam's own collection, which was this little teapot centered in the slide, which is used for brewing saffron. And obviously it's used to flavor food, to scent drinks, and it creates this very beautiful golden hue. It symbolizes luxury and joy and well-being. So it was a very nice way to tie in food into our exhibition and connect it to the collections that we hold. Another plant that we wanted to talk a bit more about was pomegranate, Punica granatum. So we have 2 illustrations on the left-hand side, and there are very different styles. So the one in the middle is fairly standard for the scientific botanical illustrations you would encounter in the collections. So you have the full fruit, you have the flower, you have the stem, you have the leaves, and then you also have a cross section, which is sketched on the right-hand side of the illustration. And then compare that to the one on the left, which feels a bit more artistic, something you would find perhaps more in an art gallery. Not to say that botanical illustration isn't artistic, but there is a clear difference between the styles of these 2 illustrations. We also did find that it was a good entry point for engagement activities that we did. So we ran workshops which were funded by the National Archives, and these workshops were with members of Persian communities and for people with Persian heritage, and they came into archives to use the collections and to see the exhibition. And obviously pomegranate is not an inherently and solely Persian fruit. People from certain regions will have associations with it. But it felt like something that a lot of people at least could draw artistic inspiration from and had maybe tasted or smelt or had felt the fruit as well. And Shabnam actually mentioned to me earlier that pomegranate is used also as I guess, a hint of color or to bring color into the longest night of the year. So the festival, I believe, is called Yalda. Um, on the longest night of the year, the 21st of December, pomegranate is brought to infuse the darkest night and the longest night of the year with a bit of color. So that is just a very nice touch there as well. But I will pass back to Shabnam now to talk a bit more about a slightly separate section of the exhibition.
We decided actually to do something a bit different for the last part of our exhibition, and we decided to put textiles related to Persian gardens. So historically, as Iranians, as Persians, we really weren't minimalistic people. You could see that we tend to use colors. We get influenced by anything in the nature. Even the Yalda night, 21st of December, that Isabel mentioned, many of the celebrations that we do, they rooted back to the nature and whatever is happening in the nature. So the textiles, the kilim, the basically the wooden block that you see is the map to be able to create a Persian rug. And these are all symbols of the things that Persians would get influenced by nature and make them a practical influence to be able to use them in their everyday life. Even though nowadays in interior design, some of these we might think that they're a little bit of luxurious materials to be used, but normally you would be able to find many of these things in any Persian household. One of the materials that we put out is the book about Persian gardens to be able to make the link between all the basically scientific materials that we put in the other display cases and the one that we are putting everything that is not exactly from the archive. So we are trying to make our points here by saying that we can easily link everything to be able to find these links further outside of the archive, outside of the Kew Gardens archive. It can be in everyday life, it can be in some other archives, or it can be as easily as some kilim that you have in your house that you might take a look and say that, oh, I have a Persian material. It's my own archive that I can explore. So in this bit, you basically see different sort of materials. They're either handmade, hand printed, or basically hand woven. As an example of those, I mentioned that we have the kalim, we have a map to create Persian rug from Kashan, we have pate from Kerman, and also chador shab, which is a hand woven textile, which you see on the left hand side of the screen. And we hope that by bringing all those scientific materials to a little more everyday and textile materials, Persian materials, we can tell our story and saying that you can explore further than this archive.
Thank you, Shabnam. And now we get onto the outreach and engagement part of it. So from the start, it was very clear there's no point really in doing this exhibition if we're not getting people in to see it, to interact with it, and to take it further. So we applied for 2 outreach grants, and obviously we're successful, which is very good. We got funding from the National Archives to run workshops with Persian communities and people with Persian heritage. And then we've also received a grant from BIPS, from the British Institute of Persian Studies, to run workshops, which I'll talk a bit more about. They'll be happening in January. And as part of these workshops, people came in to artistically engage with the materials. We had 2 members of the archives team present. We had Shabnam present to talk about the exhibition, to be able to give a tour, but also to be able to provide some Farsi translations so that this tour was these days and activities were accessible to as many people as possible. And the art activities were facilitated by Dr. Anushka Tate, who basically led the participants through creating a booklet of where they could bring in their own plant memories and their own heritage and draw inspiration, combine that with inspiration that they could draw from the exhibition and other items that were on display. And I made my own booklet in the process, so I've got that here with me. And it was a really fantastic day, and we had some really good feedback, and those booklets that people created were actually added to the archives. And it's sort of a great way of making sure that that Persian voices are added back into the archives that are already about Persia, but it just adds that perspective and that context back into the collection. I'm not sure, Shabnam, if you want to add some of your reflections on how you think the workshops went.
As Isabel mentioned, we got two funds, which it was really interesting for me from both parties. BIPS, when they offered us the grant, they wanted us to do this for public audience, which was amazing. Basically, we were going to talk about Persian materials and Persian culture or Persian story to public audience. And what was really interesting for me was the National Archive. They actually asked us to just address Persian audience. And it got me thinking that so we are actually trying to fill in the gap that both these parties who want to be able to get to each other at somehow, we are trying to fill in this gap. So that got me thinking that this is the story that we wanted to tell. Basically, the story was I just moved to the UK, wanted to be able to find something to still relate to, and I found stories within an archive that nobody from a Persian point of view ever talked about it. And we started retelling these stories from British point of view, Persian point of view, and we put it all together. And that's what happened exactly in the workshops. People came and saw that, oh, there is something here that they can relate. Now they can tell their stories. And what we actually asked them was, I don't remember if it was Kiri or Isabel mentioning that in the workshops, that we acknowledge that we are missing Persian voices within these materials that we have in our archive. So when they created their artwork, we offered them that they can actually donate it to the archive. So it is always going to be there as part of this program and as the voices that we were missing. So we are bringing these missing voices back to this archive. And as I mentioned, we were hoping to basically open these dialogues to be able to bring these voices back to this archive.
And we're reaching the end of our talk, so we have plenty of time for questions, hopefully. But we just briefly wanted to talk a bit about the legacy and avenues for further research. So obviously it's vital that this isn't a one-off project. It would have been it wouldn't have been wasted, but it would have been a shame if all of this work went and if we'd done all this work and it didn't go anywhere. So we really want to ensure that this project has a legacy of sorts. We will be reviewing the methodology with which we approached both the exhibition and the workshops that we've run so far and the workshops that are coming up, so we can pull together the lessons that we've learned from this, and we can hopefully use either a similar approach, an improved approach for future projects, because what we really would like to do is open up and unlock these collections for as many people as possible, for as wide an audience as possible. And that is hopefully what this sort of project can do. We would also like to explore options for digital exhibitions. This would increase our geographical reach, even with an event like this that we're doing to bring attention to what we've done so far. This event isn't accessible to people in Iran without a VPN due to US sanctions. So that in itself is a geographical restriction. It is obviously also hopefully a good resource to people of Persian heritage not in London who might not be able to visit the Kew Gardens archives. And I will also acknowledge that the opening hours for our exhibition, which are Tuesday and Wednesdays, and I'll highlight those at the end again, mean that some people might not be able to come and visit. So hopefully with the digital exhibition space, we can improve on that. We will hopefully also continue to create social media content, be that as a follow-up blog post reflecting on the workshops. We would perhaps want to make some videos or other short form content around the collection, items, and the exhibition as a whole. And broadly speaking, it's just important to us that we can continuously highlight these collections. There are also ideas for further research that we've got, either if that's looking at military collectors, or we can look more into a collaboration between the India Office records and Kew's institutional records. But those are just ideas. There's plenty more to be had. And Shabnam briefly wanted to mention a future project idea that she's got.
Part of the dissertation that I did, which I didn't mention before, was about checking the literature of the materials that we have in the archive, and basically going through the names, mainly the names of the places that different botanists mentioned. On the photo that you see on the left-hand side, that one is actually sent from Mashhad in Iran, which was written, it's from Meshed. If you're from Mashhad, you would pronounce the name like this, and basically British botanists, they wrote down whatever they heard. So if they want to check the accuracy of the location, you can't go with that word. Basically, you need somebody from the region to be able to go through these and correct the information. On the right hand side, you see basically a plant list sending from Ormuz, which the correct name is Hormuz, but exactly the same process of how they heard it and wrote it down. As a future project, we are going to basically interview people from different parts of Iran and ask them to pronounce these names in their own accent to be able to record them and add them to the current archive and the current table that we created according to the correction of the names, basically. So this is the phase 2, I might say.
Yes, lots of exciting stuff coming up. And finally, this is a very small selection of links that might be of use to you. So we've got the blog post, we've got the Qatar Digital Library Project links. We have a link to something that's also featured in our exhibition but has actually been digitized, which is a report on a botanical expedition to Persia. I've also given the link to our archive catalogue as well as our library catalogue. We found I've pulled out just 2 titles that were quite interesting and that we'd considered including in the exhibition. There are many, many more library items around Persia. And I'm very happy also to put I'm aware that obviously people can't click on links in a PowerPoint, so I'm very happy to put those in the chat as well if people are interested. And finally, these are our contact details. If you are interested in visiting the exhibition, please get in touch, and you don't actually have to book for it. We are open Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the exhibition is on until the 21st of January, so a minor correction to what was said earlier. The exhibition is free. You don't need to book to see the exhibition. You also do not need to pay entry to the gardens to access the exhibition. We are located just outside of the gardens towards the Kew Bridge end. I should also say that Christmas and New Year closures apply, which means the last date before Christmas that you'll be able to visit the exhibition is the 17th of December, and the first day in the new year that you can come visit is the 6th of January. But for access to other Persian materials, and if you're interested in anything else relating to our collections and you would like to make a visit to the reading room to actually access the materials and look through them yourselves, we will need a week's notice for that. So, but the same opening hours apply. And I've also linked to our social media channels. So if you would like to follow along and get in touch with either of us around future projects and inquiries and research interests, feel free. But thank you very much for listening. We have hopefully time for questions. I think Andrew will field those, but feel free to ask away.
Terrific. Thank you very much to both of you. This is really really fantastic. I really enjoyed this. Just to note for people who came in a little bit late or had some trouble connections, this talk will be uploaded to the BIP's website eventually, and you'll be able to see it and then copy down all the links. Although you can put them you won't be able to put them in the chat. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but again, anyway, these will be put up and people will be able to spot them. Please note that all questions and such should go through the Q&A function in Zoom, which should be down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And that when I relay these questions to Isabel and Shebnam, I don't read out anybody's names. I just sort of quickly summarize the question or the query or the point. And again, being as BIPS is a charity, I reserve the right to kind of edit these in an appropriate fashion in keeping with British or the UK charity laws. Early on, I had a couple of questions. One question was querying the use of the term plant hunters. And it's the questioner is saying that they found it's come increasingly into use, but kind of romanticizes colonialism.
Oh, that's interesting. I think we made a conscious effort to, in our interpretation and in our labeling, to not use the term plant hunters. It has, as far as I'm aware from the collections and also the secondary literature on our collections, the circles of researchers that work with our collections now, they don't favor that term anymore. I know that it was sort of in vogue probably a decade, 15 years ago. Plant hunters obviously implies a certain heroism and a sort of an adventurousness that is not accurate and does not really denote anything about the extraction of resources that was happening. So we personally did not use this in our labeling and would not use it in any communications really. So plant collectors would be the more neutral term that one could then contextualize more.
Okay, all right, terrific. Sorry, I missed this here. Here we are. Someone who's asking what qualities you're looking for in a researcher who might be able to join in a similar or related project, either research or exhibition.
Well,
yeah.
What qualities? Okay. Yeah. Well, we are obviously always open for research. We can't always guarantee that we'll be able to do something in the similar fashion, like putting on an exhibition. It was in this case just quite fortuitous that Shebnam started as an MA placement student and then decided to continue volunteering to get to know the collections more. And that's sort of how this whole thing snowballed. So we don't routinely do any of these actively collaborative projects where we search for collaboration partners. But if you are interested in exploring the collections further, please do get in touch. There may be options to host a blog post or sort of feature to have a bit of a in-depth conversation with researchers that could then lead somewhere, hopefully. But unfortunately, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to host anything in our spaces.
Right. Okay. Terrific. Well, someone's obviously keen. Another question is the question which I caught, especially towards the end of the discussion, what your feelings were about the involvement of the public, marginalized or local voices in helping to curate exhibitions like this.
So I guess is that in terms of the voice of the public in the materials themselves, or
that's all there is.
That's
that's all there is.
What we have tried to do with the curation of the materials is to highlight those voices of, for example, local people that would have helped these collectors. And oftentimes they're not necessarily named, they are referred to by a nickname or not at all. But hopefully highlighting these records will enable people to do more research into this aspect of the material. In terms of, I think I might leave it there because I'm unsure if it was relating to the public in terms with the curation of the exhibition, but I'm not sure, Shebnam, if you want to add to that as well.
I'm just going to add that usually exhibitions at Cube, they're not on the commercial side, they're more on the academic side. And I think probably, as far as I know, this is the one that we try to do what you ask a bit more. But we kind of did it in a way that I, as a researcher, got the chance to do the talk with more public and people, and to be able to use that information and mix it with the academic point of view to be able to choose the materials and put them on display. As mentioned, we tried to make it a little more of a storytelling rather than just putting the academic materials out. And that's the reason that you saw the teapots, the textiles, and also the outreach programs and workshops. So this, I think probably this is also something new for a Q team as well. As mentioned, usually the exhibitions and most of the things around it would be heavier on the academic side.
Okay, I've got a slew of questions, to use a technical term, so I'll try and move through them rather quickly. Someone here is saying about the reference to the lamb. The words after very good look like always young.
That sounds about right. Thank you.
Here's someone asking about pomegranate, and it's being linked to, sorry, I'm reading this off the screen. It's being linked to its health-giving qualities, and it's mentioned in literature and folklore.
I can't speak. I'll leave Shabnam to answer that one.
So with pomegranate, we were actually talking just before the talk. It's different from region to another one, and it has been used for different reasons and with different meanings in different parts of Iran, and also the great Persian Empire. For example, if you go to Armenia, it's actually their like the country's fruit, but the stories behind it and the reason that they use the fruit can be still similar to the reasons that we might use them in our Yalda celebration. And also you can see the symbol, it's sometimes it can be used as the symbol of fertility, sometimes it can be used as a symbol of a health. It kind of depends on the era and the specific location that we're talking about, but it is definitely one of the fruits that from time to time you can use it in a specific research as a symbol of something related to Persia. We acknowledge this symbolism in most of the materials that we choose, even like the pink color for the name of the exhibition is related to the Persian rose. So we are trying to use these symbols, not just to use it saying that this is exactly just Persian and nobody else have ever used this symbol, but to mention it in the context of the exhibition.
Okay, got a good number of questions left. Thank you for the presentation. Did the botanists in your archives engage in surveying land and map making for other purposes like road making or mining? Did they make any geographical map of specimens, either for their own reference or for other parties like the government of India or the UK?
So, as far as I'm aware, I am not aware of any maps created specifically for the purposes of road making and mining. I know our senior archivist may be on this call, but who might be able to help with that. But broadly speaking, the maps were often made for various reasons. A lot of the time it was to chart the territory and where to collect those plants and where things grew and where which city was and where was a safe way to pass through certain mountain regions and so on. What's quite interesting, and one thing that we heard from a workshop participant, was one of the items that we have on display is a map from Otto Stapfer's collection, which has been to which a layer has been added. So Otto Stapfer created his map in 1885, and it was reused and repurposed by someone working at the War Office in 1935. Now, the background of that isn't entirely clear to us, but there is that link between the value of maps that botanists were creating that could then be used for, and their like in-depth knowledge of a place, and that was then often used or could be used for other purposes, such as the War Office might be interested in.
Just to add something, I believe that I was doing some light reading in the materials in British Library, and yes, I remember reading that for that specific reason. There were some people who went there, not for mines. I remember reading for roads, but it was really long time ago, and probably our colleague William would be able to help you on that matter.
Okay. Have you had any contacts with the Newcastle archive of Gertrude Bell? She was a serious horticulturalist as well as a scholar of Persian poetry and a variety of other things as well.
We have not actually, and thank you very much for highlighting that. I will make a note of that, and potentially there could be some future collaboration in there.
Excellent. Another question. Again, we've got about 5 minutes left. Thank you for your wonderful work. I have two questions. I have seen some plant and seed samples in the archives that appear to be deteriorating. What strategies are used to conserve these items and similar materials? And second, are there plans to make these documents available online? That is, the sections that are not yet accessible.
So for the first question, I can say that a lot of the time, plant and seed samples that are in our archive collections, they're quite rare, and when they often found when we stumble across them, we don't often know that they're there. When they are found, the first protocol is to put them into what is called a melanic sleeve to protect any handling and to also stop any seeds from going all over the place. Typically, we would contact our conservator to do some further preventative things to it. I forgot the word for activities. But broadly speaking, the plant and seed samples they are part of the record, but we only have so many resources to deal with them, and we can't often extract them and hand them to the herbarium because then they're not complete specimens. They wouldn't be of any use to them. So it's not a case of giving them to a different collection to take care of. But we try our best to sort of make bespoke boxes and bespoke envelopes and bespoke folders for them when we can and when our resources allow. In answer to the second question, there aren't any current plans to make these documents available online beyond potentially a digital exhibition in the future, which obviously wouldn't entail the complete item, like a complete volume or a complete notebook. Digitization requires cataloging beforehand, so there's a lot of work to be done in preparation. There's a lot of work that involves finding a place to host all of these images. So there's a lot of resources, both time and financial, that we don't currently envision having. So unfortunately, they are for the most part accessible in our reading room. But we do offer, I should say, if people aren't able to come to our reading room, you can order scans if you're particularly interested in an item. We can offer that.
We may not get to all of the questions, but I'll keep plugging on here. Do you know of any Persian? Oh, sorry, I missed one, I think. Yes. What is the extent of documented plant and tree species removed from Iran through historical botanical collection and exchange?
That is a question I can't answer on the spot. If you are interested, I could please do send an email and I can look further into especially our goods inwards and outwards collection, which documents plant movements very well. But yes, that is what I would recommend.
That's great. Do you know of any Persian archives and other herbaria or botanical garden archives, or have plans to explore those?
I not really from our end. I don't know, Shabnam, you are aware of more.
I'm not aware, and to be honest, my future plan is not just specifically going to botanical archives. Basically, my plan is to go to different archives searching for Persian materials to be able to find the links and imagine like in 15 years, probably I've gone to like 8 archives, finding different Persian materials and finding their stories and putting these stories together. I'm not really looking to go just through botanical archives because, as mentioned, for this exhibition, we're talking about everything but botanical. So yeah.
Okay. I'm getting down to the wire. Do you mention smell or perfumes in the exhibitions?
Not in the exhibition. The reason why that was mentioned in my biography was specifically because I can't really stop harping on about the topic of smell in heritage. I find it particularly interesting. I think it would be a very interesting perspective from which to approach materials, be that with sort of smells of, for example, Persian rose, or bringing items and materials to life that way. But unfortunately, there was not capacity to mention specifically smell or perfume in this exhibition, but potentially in the future, who knows?
There's a few more questions. I'm going to encourage those people whose questions I'm not able to deal with to email you directly. But there is one question here towards the end that I thought I would pick up because it kind of summarizes the whole thing. What finding has surprised you the most when researching and putting together the exhibition? And at that point, I'm sorry, we'll have to end, folks, because it's come to our time.
Shabnam, do you want to go first?
The surprising thing for me was the list of the surprising and interesting for British botanists, because they would mention everyday routines that they're not really surprising for somebody as Iranian or Persian, but it was really surprising for them to see that. For example, even like the details of the yogurt drink that we have, which is not really surprising for us, but it's surprising for everybody else. So the details of the things that they were interested and they were writing about it in their notes was the most surprising thing for me.
Isabel?
I think probably similar, although a lot of those details would surprise me too. But I think it was, broadly speaking, just the wealth of stuff that we had, considering that Persia was not a British colony. I was not expecting for us to have a lot of materials relating to the region, and just the variety and the scope of it all was just fascinating. I know that's a very vague answer, but unfortunately, it's hard to pinpoint which one was the most surprising.
Terrific. Well, that's a very a good way to sort of end the discussion today. Again, if you have questions either here or you have further questions after this, please don't hesitate to send an email to Isabel and Shebnem. The talk will be uploaded eventually, and the slides will go with that, so you'll be able to contact them directly. This is our last talk of 2025. So I want to thank everybody for coming in and participating in this one. I was absolutely fascinating, completely outside the envelope. So I thought this was really interesting. So I want to thank you, Isabel, Shebnem. I want to thank Brendan, who on behalf of BIPS has been managing the tech. And again, may I wish a good morning or a good afternoon or a good evening to everybody concerned, everybody who's been there. And we'll see everybody in January in 2026 with a talk by Julia Hartley from the University of Glasgow. Again, this talk will be uploaded, so if you've had to drop out, come in and have some connection problems, the talk will be uploaded onto the BIPS website and you'll be able to look at it and then see the addresses to contact Shebnem and Isabel. And with that, thank you all very, very much. A good evening.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.